Hey, fellow talent warriors. Welcome to episode 4 of the Talent War podcast with me, George Randle, and Tom Lokar, PhD in all things talent. Today's topic, absolutely timely. We had to move things around. It's about coming back to work. Hybrid, remote all the time, or in the office full time. We're going to get after it here shortly. All right, Tom. Wow. We had to switch around topics because the vaccinations, 50% of the population vaccinated. And now people are trying to figure out how to get people back to work. And I know that's got to be pressing on your mind because your business is truly hands-on. So are you seeing it too?
Well, I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast. The healthcare industry never went home. Our patients need us 24/7. So one of the, I thought, really cool early strategies our CEO here at Oceans had was if our people on the shop floor in the hospitals are at work, then we're coming into the office unless you have some sort of prevailing condition that would make getting COVID more risky for you. So we've been full time, and then everyone came back full time in our corporate centers, what we call our support centers, back in May. So otherwise, I think if you look at any healthcare system, hospital, acute care, home health, their folks were in the office, in the building, and there to support their healthcare providers on the what I call the shop floor. Is probably the wrong term for hospitals. But I think the interesting thing was I was listening to another podcast, the All In podcast, and they just happened to mention, and then I looked it up on the internet, that, a lot of the tech companies have started to, I would say, reverse their position and say, you know what, we are coming back to work. Some are doing a hybrid, 3 on, 2 home, and then you can, I guess, pick. I probably should have dug into it a little more leading to this podcast, but I guess you could pick which 3 or which 2. Other companies like Twitter are never coming back. I think that's because their CEO is a introvert and doesn't like people. He just likes tweeting. So Jack is just going to stay home and keep his people home.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg had made comments about, I heard on this podcast, about liking the time to clear his head. And they got talking about, and then I'll get to my thoughts and hand over to you, but they got talking about, and these are all younger tech billionaires in this All In podcast. 2 of them I worked with at AOL, Jason Calacanis and Chamath Palihapitiya. I think Chamath went on to become like employee 15 at Facebook. So you can imagine how well he did after he left AOL in 2005, I think.
Like to be living that life.
When we were all just signing up on Facebook, but still had our MySpace accounts. And I got thinking as I was listening to them, I was driving back from a business trip, and I was thinking about coming back to work for any company, whether it was restaurant, retail, corporate. There's the whole commercial real estate side of things and where that industry is going and where they're at. Another business that I was only briefly associated with, the parking industry. Imagine what happened to the parking industry in cities around the country, the valet industry, because no one was going into work during the lockdown. So all that's turning around. People are coming back into the office. My little office park here, George, back behind our old HP headquarters in Plano, Texas, which was the original EDS campus. I see more and more cars now in the parking lot. Traffic's a little worse at 7:30. Yeah. You used to get on at 7:30 and it was like it was 5 a.m. on a Sunday. There's just nobody there. But now traffic's there. You're having to hit the brakes. I got to pay attention. I can't text, drink coffee, and drive. What I think is happening and what is going to happen, and I wrote a blog post which will be published next week about this. And then I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this topic and just your thoughts on coming back to work. Is I believe that we need physical presence to not just be productive, but to be engaged and happy at work. And it's not just the presence through this screen as you and I are doing this podcast and can see each other. It's just the presence of, your electrons, my electrons, seeing each other face to face, the nuances of our hand gestures, our eye gestures, our tone, the ability to, you and I have been working together now, and I live here in Dallas, you live in Austin, but it was always great when we were doing work and I was there. It felt so much more like I was a part of the company and the team than when I was just on the call 2 or 3 times a week from my home. And so I think that's what's ultimately the big human psychology movement or experiment here is we need to be present with each other or we're missing something. what are these screens made of? Silicon?
Yeah.
We're just plastic silicon electrons through a computer, and that's not good enough. I said in the post, at some point you got to smell someone's breath and feel their presence, and actually, hey, we're in HR, so it's okay. We get to hug each other because no one will report us. You need to be around your colleagues in a more, I'll call it intimate way, but it's really what I really mean is a present way where we're really present together.
I'm grateful for the Talent War group. We're EF Overwatch Talent War group. We got this nice office and we see each other. There's a part of me that kind of enjoyed the freedom of working remote. And there were some upsides to the pandemic. And it certainly did force people to learn how to lead and to manage people remotely. And I know that people got used to it, but I'm one of those people that I'm just like you. I'm like, I can't even calculate the value of a drive-by meeting in the hallway. Zoom fatigue's a real thing for me. Thank God I have people in the office, but, at my previous employer, who shall not be named, I got Zoom fatigue because every simple conversation was turned into 10 minutes. And now the challenge is that I think leaders recognize the importance of that human connection, that human presence, that those drive-bys, those 5-minute conversations over coffee where all of a sudden you've moved a project 2 weeks ahead by getting coffee. But I think leaders are now struggling. And, I want to kind of segue back to the previous episode because you said this is the era of the CHRO. And I think you're damn right. And now CHROs are having to coach leaders through how firm should you be on requiring people to come back to work? I've had 3 or 4 clients who are like, hey, we're forcing people to come back to work, but now we're getting resistance. And I'm like, I think now we have to move into the storytelling of, listen, being together is good. Let's get after it again. And I can't imagine not being around people. And there's some people that the employees are now kind of saying, hey, I don't want to come back. So what's an HR leader to do?
Yeah, and I think the big picture answer to that for me as a CHRO is, do we know what our productivity has been since we've been more work from home than work in the office? If that productivity has stayed the same or gone up, then, maybe you don't force the issue, but then think about the long-term impact of people working away from each other and what it means for your culture, what it means to be a company, and what does it mean for adding new employees? Because those employees have already worked for you. They've already been oriented. They've already been enculturated. And now you send them home for a year and they're working from their desktop and it's working fine. They're knowledge workers. My understanding from reading I did a quick scan of contact center businesses, call center businesses, and many of them are reporting productivity upticks via the throughput of work through their contact center, which is, as you know, with contact centers, they are highly automated, but they're highly metriced. Like we measure everything in a call and contact center. So they're noticing an uptick. And frankly, I'm not surprised because when I was at HP, I had the opportunity to go to Vegas to one of the big call center contact center conferences before the HP Discovery event. So the week before was they would overlap. And this was already happening. In fact, I ended up flying there with the CEO of a company. He was the CEO of this contact center company. He had 1,000 employees. They all worked from home. And then, of course, after HP, I went to Mitel and we make contact software and products for contact centers. And so I saw how productive my wife could be if she wanted to be a contact center employee or a call center employee from her house. They ship you the technology. They ship you the software. You take the training. And next thing you know, you're taking calls or you're processing credit cards or whatever the business is that you're supporting. You're processing online orders. But having run, and I'm just doing a parallel here, a comparison, having run call centers at AOL, where being present and being part of the AOL culture was really important to sort of the ethos of what we were trying to do for members and for our products and services, I feel like that would be missing. And to try to bring in new people in, they're never going to be a part of your culture. They're always going to be you're going to be paying them full time, but it's almost like they're 1099'd in working from home. And the long-term, I guess, company EQ impact is what I would be concerned about. And, if you watch my LinkedIn today, I'm sort of on a rant about mental health and mental health awareness in companies. And so I worry about the long-term impact on mental health if we aren't around each other.
I was trying to put it into having been in the talent acquisition space. A couple of weeks ago, we were working together. I had anywhere from 275 to 400 people stretched out.
Mm-hmm.
And, you had to manage that way because you're a global leader. But what was interesting is fast forward to the last company that I was at that shall not be named because of my non-disparagement agreement. It was interesting. We had like this bullpen of recruiters, and the level of activity, the level of productivity, the level of connection, the personality, and just that buzz of the hive was 200% more effective than having everybody remote. Now, that's just my little sample group. I'm just one of those people that, I appreciate flex, but I think there's a lot. I'm just one of those proponents of, I appreciate that there's the commute. We have childcare issues. We have all those other issues we have to deal with day to day. But you can't go without people being in the office and having that in-person shared sense of community. I can't imagine being one of those people that says, you could just work remotely. There are some functions that can, but that human interaction, it's everything, I think. And hearing those people around you and how they're working, how they're talking to people, those drive-bys, those informal meetings that you don't get scheduled, but you bump into somebody, you move a project along, you move something ahead, you learn a piece of information that you never ever thought that you would get otherwise in an office. I just can't imagine. I was talking to somebody yesterday and I said, I appreciate that everybody thinks the pendulum is swinging to the full remote, but I think it's temporary. And I think everybody's, going to be back in the office. And maybe we flex a little bit more than we did because we've learned how to work remote. But if I were a leader right now, I'd be saying, hey, look, 3-4 days a week, 3.5, whatever the number is. I want that tribe in the office. I want them interacting because there's just too many intangibles that make the place better.
Well, I think there's a hidden cost to working remote beyond the lack of presence and interaction. And that is what I've noticed. And I noticed this last year. I started, this, George, but I took a CHRO job with a company headquartered in a different state. The plan was to relocate there, but because of COVID, I started remotely as the head of HR for this 30,000 person company. 17 leaders I had to meet via Teams, Microsoft Teams or Zoom, and then 15 other more important leaders I needed to see over time. And to me, it was just a recipe for disaster. There was no way they were going to understand who I was, how I operated, and you never knew whether you were being accepted through the video because you were constantly on to the next video. And all they took from it was whatever you gave them on camera. And do you know what? I'm not that great of an actor. I tend to be pretty authentic and straightforward to a fault. It just didn't work for me. But the other thing that I've noticed now that I've been working here at Oceans, when we had people still at home, and I noticed this at that other company as well, you thought email volume and email takeover of your day was difficult pre-COVID. The amount of emails people are sending. Because you know what? I'll give you a perfect example, and you've already hit on it. But we were on a 40-person call today about a bunch of hospital startups. We have an integration meeting, we could call it, right? Weekly, bi-weekly integration meeting. I'm on that call, and an issue came up on cost center movement of employees who are already in our payroll system. They're going to be moving hospitals and they're going to be clocking into a new facility. And the way we have our payroll system set up is they have to be moved in the cost center and in the payroll system. They can't just clock in. Okay. I was like incredulous. I'm like, wait a minute. That sounds like we set up our payroll system wrong. Well, instead of sending an email to 20 people, I just went down the hall, grabbed my 2 HR people that I needed to talk to and the finance person, said, hey, just real quick, what's going on here? Is there a way that we could reconfigure this? This seems like a manual move that's too much of a pain in the arse. And we solved it, right? I can give you 10 other examples that have happened in the first 6 weeks here where walking down the hall or popping in, my CEO pops in and says, hey, have you thought about this? Can you take a look at this? And it ends up being gold because I'm like, no, I hadn't. Could you imagine if he sent that an email? What does this email mean? Does he mean I'm supposed to go there? Like, what's he asking? Now I got to call him or I send him an email for clarification. I'm sorry, younger generation. There's no substitute for human interaction. And I know none of them have ever seen that United commercial where the executive sales leaders handing out tickets to each of his sales reps and telling them where they're going because they had a customer complain that they don't care about their customer anymore. And they ask him, where are you going, Bob? And Bob says, I'm going to see that customer. And, that's the end of the United commercial. Brilliant, right? I still think that resonates today. There's no substitute for physical presence. I got lots of friends who've tried the remote relationship. Their marriages are no longer. This is just human nature. I don't have to cite a ton of data. It's hard to have relationships and to be truly productive on a human level without presence, in my humble opinion.
I was just thinking about the email thing. As soon as COVID kicked off and we were all remote, two things. One, you can't convey tone in an email like you can in person. There's just so much to the human connection, the language, the body language, that in person you can't convey in an email. Otherwise, you'd be scrolling forever if you typed out every possible thought. But one of the things that struck me is when I was working remote is people that didn't know how to manage and lead generally, their CYA moment was, I'm going to add people in the CC line. Mm-hmm. And I think as a vice president, my normal email was probably 150, 175 inbound a day, which was normal. It's not a big deal.
Jesus.
That doubled or tripled in COVID.
Hit delete. I start hitting delete.
Oh, well, I have the 4 Ds. I've been trying to teach Talent War Group. I said, there's the 4D, which is do it. If you can do it in 2 minutes or less, do it. Don't work out of your inbox, delete it, defer it, or delegate it. To, every email, do those. But I was getting to a point because of COVID where I'd have 300 emails in my inbox. And because, most of our jobs, and for those global leaders out there that are maybe in the US and they have to follow the sun, you've got the Philippines waking up, you've got China waking up, you've got Singapore, Bangalore. And then as you roll that over towards the West, I would wake up each morning and all of a sudden I wake up to 150 unread emails. And I would say 90% of them, I'm in the CC line because nobody's in the office. We're all remote. And they're like, well, I want to make sure George knows about this, because we're not going to have a conversation with anybody. And so I think the email volume would go down. I think the mental health would go up. You accomplish so much more. I'm seeing those studies too, which I don't know. I think the people that are writing some of these studies about the productivity during COVID are the same people that are writing efficacy statements for all the new drugs that you see on TV. I mean, it's like paid research. Oh, people are finding that I'm 40, 50% more productive at home. I'm like, you gain some productivity, but seriously, and a half over that you're more productive at home, I find that hard to believe.
Well, that's like perceived exertion, or those are all just like our employee opinion surveys. I love a good employee opinion survey, but it's not hard science. You're looking for themes and patterns. You ask 2,000 people, randomly ask 2,000 people, do they feel more productive on a scale of 1 to 5? You're going to get some data that might be interesting. Is it causal? No. Is it longitudinal? No. Are there other factors or variables to be considered that could have affected that productivity? Yes. None of that's controlled for in these studies. I never see the linear multiple regression line that shows how the data correlates.
There's about 15 people right now listening to this that are going to listen to this podcast that are going to Google that phrase and wonder what the hell you're talking about.
It's when you correlate multiple variables around, independent variables around a dependent variable to determine cause and effect relationships. And I'm just saying these studies that are done, that are cited in the news as percentages, and CNN or Fox tells you this group of people believes this. As a scientist, I have to ask myself, what was the hypothesis we were testing, and how did we test that, and how did we control for variables? The same science that we use to come up with the vaccine, double blinds. We use those same kinds of methodologies, the experimental method, in understanding human psychology or studying anything. And I don't believe, to your point, George, what you're reading is actually scientifically. I don't believe it.
I think it's, how do you feel about that? I know we're about halfway through the show, so I'm going to ask kind of a little bit harder question. So one of the things that we want to make sure is that we just don't talk about the issues, is that we provide you kind of some relative thoughts. And so, there's a lot of people that are now leaders that are faced with how they address their teams. What would you tell a manager, a leader, and saying, hey, as you approach this come back to work, What would you be telling those leaders, both C-suite and, 1, 2, 3 click downs? What would you be telling them?
I think, well, you are putting me on the spot, but I guess I'm supposed to be.
I'm busy Googling that phrase that you gave me.
Yeah, PhD, all things talent. So I better have an answer. I think I would start with the culture of our team. And I might say, I might take some ownership over my own leadership frailties and say, look, I've been doing this now for a year and I've appreciated your flexibility and I appreciated the flexibility in my own life. But I think the culture of our team and the effectiveness of our team is best when we're on the field together.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's important that if there aren't any underlying health issues that would cause you not to come back, I'd really want us to come back together, back to work. The company needs us together. They need us working side by side, cube to cube, and going out to lunch and having a beer after work and having the 5-minute quick meeting on X, Y, and Z. The company's life, its soul, its heartbeat is us. And so I think to me, it's important for that reason, as well as the performance of this team, the performance of our company, that we come back together. That might be my angle.
Yeah, I know sometimes I'm not the most brilliant when it comes to advice. I was thinking that more people would want to come back to work. And I know one of the things we did here at the Talent War Group is we just kind of looked at each individual person and we just said, okay, hey, what's working for them? How do we balance the needs of building a team, building a tribe, having that buzz in the office, that shared productivity, those pop-ins, those drive-bys? And how do we balance that against, what you've got going on in your personal life? I do think that's the one benefit, is it did make leaders a lot more cognizant and have to or be forced to deal with and recognize that people do have a life outside of work, that work isn't their life. So I think that they were forced to manage those things. And that's the part I don't want to lose. I would tell leaders, don't lose those things. Still be cognizant of your people, still be cognizant of, hey, we've got to figure out the right balance here. But I would be, look, we're going to figure this out, but absolutely you're coming back into the office. You're coming back into our location. You're going to be out visiting clients. By the way, I'm headed up for Father's Day this weekend to surprise my dad. This won't go to posting and my dad won't listen to it until after I've been there. And I got a notification from Austin Airport that said, expect more than a 2-hour delay just to get through security. So clearly, at least in the state of Texas, we are full tilt back out in the open.
Oh, hey, I took my daughter last week to her camp in Alabama, which she's been going to for years now. And I could not believe the amount of people in the terminal. And I'm noticing it's a much more, that's summertime. So it's always summertime. It's less business. It's always much more diverse population of flyers, but it is a way more diverse population of flyers. And so, George, I'm just going to warn you, be patient, because there are people that don't know how to get through TSA as astutely as you do. And they're going to need
do a whole episode on.
Dude, I'm ready. I'm ready.
My God.
There are rules and protocols. And if we all follow them, just like the highway, we all get there safely and faster. Get on the plane and get your luggage up above and take your seat.
And the seats are numbered and alphabetized, for Christ's sake. If you don't know your alphabet and you don't know your numbers and how they go 1, 2, 3, all the way up to row 32, please don't get on a plane, for God's sakes. Oh, drives me nuts.
So yes, the country's full tilt, because I was at one of the, I was in the terminal where you had more regional flights, going to, I was going to Birmingham, Alabama, but people were going all over the country to Mexico and flights were packed. So, that's a good sign that the economy is cooking along and people are getting out and about. I think it'll be good for commercial real estate that people come back to work. That's not an industry I want to see.
Oh, God.
I want to see dying.
No, I don't want to see that either. I don't want to see that. But the only time where I don't have traffic is at 04:30 going to the gym.
Right.
But, the traffic's picking up.
Now, I have heard, to your question and to your own, the advice you gave about we learned balance is important. I have heard anecdotally that people are making different work choices if their companies are requiring them to come back, and working from home became more important than working in an office, and you're that type of person, then, you might make a career change. You might make a choice to go do something else. I think that's unfortunate, but I think that's how you start making prioritizations, especially if you're young in your career. Make those prioritizations now, because if you don't, you're going to be miserable later. You're going to find yourself trapped in a career or a job that you don't want to be in because you didn't make those choices early on. And for people who are being required to go back to work, but they still want some freedom, I say just go ask.
Yeah.
You never know what the answer is going to be unless you ask, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And maybe your manager or your company will make accommodations of some kind.
Yeah. We could do a whole show on that. Matter of fact, we need to, about just the term ask, because there's that whole thing that we need to be giving to employees who aren't in leadership positions about asking for what they want and having adult professional conversations to advance their career. But I think people should learn to come back and ask and say, hey, this is what I need to stay productive. But I know we've got a lot of leaders out there that are facing that challenge where people are saying, yeah, you know what? I don't want to come back to the office. I said, and that's putting CHROs, it's putting every leader at every level in a very precarious position. And, my advice to them would just simply be, look, you've got to determine if, to your point earlier, is that productivity, is what that person is delivering, is it okay to be done 100% remote? If it's not, I think you need to hold the line. Because your responsibility as a leader is that full team dynamic. You do have to honor the individual. You do have to honor their balance. You want to make every accommodation, but ultimately, like we talk about in the book, the teams win, individuals don't. So you got to be thinking of the team. And so case by case basis, you're going to have to look at it and make some really hard calls coming up. But I think you're right. There's going to be a lot of people who don't want to come back to work and kind of lay down that gauntlet and say, yeah, I'm not coming back.
This may seem a little more frivolous than how we're talking about it, but we can't, let's not make the topic life or death. So thinking to being back at work, what is your favorite back at work sort of activity or team activity or bonding? What is it that you most enjoy or have enjoyed about being at work versus at home, being with your people versus distant from them?
I think my two things were coffee and happy hour. Because we had these great big kitchens, we had good coffee, and it was the greatest thing to grab 2 or 3 people on the team, whether they were in my team or the greater HR team, and say, hey, let's go refill our coffee. And you can pull 10 minutes, you're away from email, you're away from your phone, your cell phone's off, and you have the undivided attention and just this good connection moment of 10, 15 minutes in the kitchen. And you never know where that conversation is going to go. So I always love that. And then, we had a thing about every other Friday. It's probably not great to advertise, but there were some adult beverages that were hidden away in the office. And we would celebrate the wins of the week on Friday before we left. And I think it kind of humanized the team. It humanized us as leaders. It allowed us to celebrate wins. We didn't have to go anywhere, and we got known for it. So people would start coming down from other departments, and they would just stop by. And what it really did for all of us, I think, is it popped the balloon of the work stress. And everybody kind of realized and said, hey, you know what? This is a good group of people. We're all in the same ecosystem. We're all in the same fishbowl together. Let's toast to, the great things we did this week. So between coffee and a happy hour, oddly enough, both involved drinking, but they were some of the best times. And it was the first thing that I missed when COVID hit.
My favorite of all time was I always enjoyed after we did a strategy meetings or a tough board meeting or an operations review when I was at Mitel was the pizza afterwards and just hanging out and having a few beers and then going back to the hotel. We'd be at the office for 15 hours, going back to the hotel, getting the jeans on and a T-shirt and just sitting down in the lobby bar, just literally talking about life and getting to know people personally. But I think at AOL, we had a group of us that biked, mountained, and rode, and we had a regular Friday afternoon, especially in the summers, because we had alternating half days. So 75% of us could take Friday off at noon. The other 25% had to be there to cover, and then you rotated around through the summer. So we'd had that summer bike ride, and then we'd go and get wings and have a contest as to who could eat the hottest wing. And the one wing was, I swear to God, they put pepper spray on it at the very end and brought it out. And my HR colleague and I, Dave Harmon, who's a serial CHRO as well, now retired. I guess he made better career decisions than me. He and I both ate that. And I'm just going to tell you, that was the funnest time worst night of my life. Beats any flu I've ever had. Absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, I miss those too. I think, one of the things when I think about kind of the happy hour, and we would have them every other week is probably a little bit too much. But what I remember fondly is in my roles of...
You fondled? What? I said we could hug.
I remember fondly, favorably.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Glad we clarified that for the listening audience. Is when you're going in the jobs that you've had, Tom, or the jobs that I've had, and if you're in talent acquisition, it's drinking from two fire hoses. But what was really nice is during that happy hour, that little session in the office, my whole team got my undivided attention. And they got to ask whatever the heck they wanted to ask.
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted to know what did the CEO really mean by this? Or, hey, this came out, or I heard somebody resigned, or the office gossip, or, the rumor mill, whatever was going around, that whole VP Mach 2 with my ass on fire was able to stop, and my team got my time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really like, because I was able to convey some of the best information. I was able to give them the most important thing that I could give them, which was my time and my authenticity and straightforward answers. Usually after the second drink, those answers got a little bit more colorful, but the team really appreciated it. And I really appreciated being removed from all of the death by PowerPoint, running to this meeting, going to ask for this more budget money, trying to get this tool implemented, get this contract signed, put out this fire, put out that fire. Everything got shut off, and I got to be with the people that when you think about it, you're spending so much time with. And it was just, it was just a great thing. So people going back to the office, I can't fathom being without that. I just can't.
I think one of my regrets of my career is I've changed companies a couple of times, 5 times, and made great friends at all those companies. But, life moves on, your career moves on, and you can't see them, all of them, or stay in touch with them as you'd like. But during those 5 or 6 year periods, you were brothers and sisters in arms. And I don't want to equate work with war, but I mean it more from a collegial standpoint. You really are bonded to those people. And I can't say I have any bad experiences or regrets of anyone I've worked with professionally. It's been a hoot. And the only regret is you don't get to stay best friends with them for as long as you'd like, because you move on to another company, they move on, life changes. But I know if I ran into them, because I have occasionally, it's like you don't miss a beat. And that's the sign of friendship.
Look, if you're going to be on slide change number 52 for a 100 slide deck, for a QBR, for a board meeting, for, year closeout, pick your meeting, OpEx review, your next year planning, let's be honest, it sucked. Those were it's just like I wanted to jab a sharp object through my computer screen so many times doing slide revisions for data that I knew that they would look at for 0.5 seconds and then move on. But you're right. But I got to do that stuff with colleagues that were feeling the same stress and the same pressure that I was. And so when we finally got to launch that last revision, or we got to get that last communication, that last product line, that last message to our customers and clients out the door, and sit and have a beer, cocktail, share pizza, whatever we catered in, whatever box lunch. Tom, this is a true crazy offline topic, but that's one of the things that makes the Talent War group great, is we get to hang out together. We have shared lunches. We do things because, it's a team. It's that tribe. And there's just so much you lose by being remote. And I think people ought to be excited about going back into the office, because I know that those were some of the best times. Not the slide making, but, the fact that, at the end of the day, we could say, hey, we killed it. As far as our function goes, we put up the best stuff. We took care of, we got the business on track. We're showing how well we did. And, it was painful to do it, but, we're proud of our work, and let's celebrate.
You reminded me who really understands this, although they're all still on lockdown, are Europeans. Breaking bread, having a meal together.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Is so important to understanding who you are as a business person. And I really learned that in my time at HP and my talent. I remember going out with my Belgium colleagues in my tel, and we went out for lunch and we had pasta and we had beers because they're going to have beers with lunch. And then we had wine and then we had dessert. And 2.5 hours later, we were going back to the office, and I'm in a food coma. It's like Thanksgiving for me. I'm just trying not to, lay down and undo my belt buckle and turn football on. And they're ready to go. And they feel like we really accomplished something in those 2.5 hours because we got to know Tom and he got to know us and he broke bread with us. And that was true of all of my name the country. Those were the most important moments. And so negotiating works council agreements and sometimes labor reductions, which were truly negative experiences and I never relished, were made a little more doable because of the trust that was formed from being present over a bowl of pasta and a beer and a glass of wine.
I think you just said it. And I think you'd agree with me. Every time that I would go do one of those trips, break bread, have beers, and then when I came back to the States and I had to be in a meeting with those people, that meeting was infinitely better and far more productive because oh, yeah, hey, George is on the call, man. This is great. All right, we're going to get this shit straightened out right now.
Yep.
It built that trust. And I think, there's plenty of dynamic and great people and great leaders. And I applaud all of those who have managed and led and made it happen, got after it via Zoom, via Teams, via whatever tool you use.
Absolutely.
But there's absolutely no replacing. And I'm excited that people are going to get back to work. And God love the people that are having to deal with, striking the balance. But if you're a good leader out there, you need to go for the balance because there's nothing like a team in person. I think that's what you and I agree on.
Yeah. And look, the Talent War Group looks forward to seeing our clients in person and being present with you as we work through those business opportunities you have. We're looking forward to forming those relationships with you personally. And that's going to happen by being present.
Yeah. The last client I talked to, I've been promised great Memphis barbecue. So I think that's a pretty sweet deal.
That's a great deal.
So can't wait for that. So we're getting up on time. And folks, one of the things we do is we close out. Make sure that you listen in to the next episode. And what Tom and I wanted to talk about in episode 5, we're going to talk about executive blind spots and executive coaching. How do we make our leadership teams better? And I can't imagine that you're going to be at a loss for words on that topic, Tom.
I'll do my best to not be too verbose and allow you an opportunity.
So any closing thoughts on the get back in the office, build great teams, build great culture, do great things?
No, I think we said it all. I'm looking forward to high-fiving and hugging people in person.
Yeah, and you're going to be down here next week. We're going to have the team together. So looking forward to that. So everybody that's listening, get back in the office, break bread, build culture, build teams, build fun, get after it. The most powerful thing in the world is the U.S. economy, and that's what businesses do. So thank you very much for listening to episode 4 of the Talent War podcast with me, George Randle, and PhD, all things talent, Mr. Tom Lokar. And we hope you join us for episode 5, Executive Blind Spots. Until then, talent's what powers the world. Never forget it. And thank you for listening to the Talent War podcast, where we discuss all things talent, focusing on having a true talent mindset, which is the core belief the only true competitive advantage you can hope to achieve and maintain is your talent. Join us for the next episode of the Talent War podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you download your podcasts. If you like what you heard, subscribe, and please leave us a kind review. Do connect with Mr. Dr. Tom Lokar and myself, George Randle, on the Talent War Group's LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram account. And by all means, send your comments, inquiries, and any ideas for controversial talent, HR-related topics to media@talentwargroup.com. The Talent War podcast is brought to you by the Talent War Group, an executive search and advisory firm with services like talent acquisition, leadership development, seminars, executive coaching. Basically, we work with you to bring talent solutions to business problems. And to get started, visit us at talentwargroup.com.